Hi. I decided I would just try a little bit of an experiment here. I've got a couple of texts which I've had for many years. My dad got it from the Wilson Quarterly, if I remember right, and actually photocopied from that. It's by Richard Lederer, who's one of our favorites of wordplay. He's collected mistakes in history essays for many years. Not only from his own experience, but also from others that have been sent in. And so these are delicious things. It's by Richard Lederer at St. Paul's School. It's called The History of the World According to Student Bloopers. There's another one here by I'm looking up here, Anders Henriksen. I've had that one for many years as well. But I'm going to start with the Lederer because I love it. And I decided to post this because I just have tried for many years to read this out loud, and it always is impossible to read without laughing uncontrollably. So I'm going to try and see if I can do this better. Also, I wanted to capture my excessively scruffy demeanor here. Here we try. Okay. I'm going to read this with a solemn tone of voice. I hope that the microphone is not blocked. Oh, wait, I think it is being blocked. Well, we'll try and see how it goes, okay? Oh, it's tipping away. All right, maybe this will work better. It seems to be holding steady. Here we go. The History of the World According to Student Bloopers. Although there's a subtitle that says The World According to Student Bloopers. Richard Lederer, St. Paul's School. I will try to read this without cracking up too much. And by the way, this is online. I'll put a link. Okay. I'll just read the text itself instead of the intro. The inhabitants of Egypt were called mummies. They lived in the Sahara Desert and traveled by Camelot. The climate of the Sahara is such that the inhabitants have to live elsewhere, so certain areas of the desert are cultivated by irrigation. The Egyptians built the pyramids in the shape of a huge triangular cube. The pyramids are a range of mountains between France and Spain. Yes. Yes. The Bible is full of interesting caricatures. In the first book of the Bible, Genesis, Adam and Eve were created from an apple tree. One of their children, Cain, asked, "Am I my brother's son?" God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac on Mount Montezuma. Jacob, son of Isaac, stole his brother's birthmark. Jacob was a patriarch who brought up his 12 sons to be patriarchs, but they did not take to it. One of Jacob's sons, Joseph, gave refuge to the Israelites. Pharaoh forced the Hebrew slaves to make bread without straw. Moses led them to the Red Sea, where they made unleavened bread, which is bread made without any ingredients. Afterwards, Moses went up on Mount Sinai to get the 10 Commandments. David was a Hebrew king, skilled at playing the lyre. He fought with the philatelists, a race of people who lived in biblical times. Solomon, one of David's sons, had 500 wives and 500 porcupines. Without the Greeks, we wouldn't have history. The Greeks invented 3 kinds of columns: Corinthian, Doric, and Ironic. They also had myths. A myth is a female moth. One myth said that the mother of Achilles dipped him in the river One myth said that God damn. One myth said that the mother of Achilles dipped him in the river Styx until he became intolerable. Achilles appears in the Iliad by Homer. Homer also wrote the Odyssey, in which Penelope was the last hardship. that Ulysses endured on his journey. Actually, Homer was not written by Homer, but by another man of that name. Socrates was a famous Greek teacher who went around giving people advice. They killed him. Socrates dies of an overdose of wedlock. In the Olympic Games, Greeks ran races, hurled... In the Olympic Games, Greeks ran races, jumped, hurled the biscuits, and threw the java. The reward to the victor was a coral wreath. The government of Athens was democratic because people took the law into their own hands. There were no wars in Greece, as the mountains were so high that they couldn't climb over to see what their neighbors were doing. When they fought the Parisians... Oh, I never saw that before. I think when they fought the Parisians, the Greeks were outnumbered because the Persians had more men. Eventually, the Romans conquered the Greeks. History called people Romans because they never stayed in one place for very long. At Roman banquets, the guests wore garlic in their hair. Julius Caesar extinguished himself at the battlefields of Gaul. The Ides of March killed him because they thought he was going to be made king. Nero was a cruel tyranny who would torture his poor subjects by playing the fiddle to them. Then came the Middle Ages. King Alfred conquered the Danes. King Arthur lived in the age of chivalry. King Harlaud mustered his troops before the Battle of Hastings. Joan of Arc was canonized by George Bernard Shaw. And the victims of the Black Death grew boobs. The victims of the Black Death grew boobs on their necks. Finally, the Magna Carta provided that no free man should be hanged twice for the same offense. In the medieval times, most of the people were illiterate. The greatest writer of the time was Chaucer, who wrote many tales. Phooey. The greatest writer of the time was Chaucer, who wrote many poems and verse, and also wrote literature. Another tale tells of William Tell, who shot an arrow through an apple while the images. Another tale tells of William Tell, who shot an arrow through an apple while standing on his son's head. Tricky. The Renaissance was an age in which more individuals felt the value of their human being. Martin Luther was nailed to the church door at Wittenberg for selling papal indulgences. He died a horrible death, being excommunicated by a bull. It was the painter Donatello's interest in the female nude that made him the father of the Renaissance. It was an age of great inventions and discoveries. Gutenberg invented the Bible. Sir Walter Raleigh is an historical figure because he invented cigarettes. Another important invention... It's the next one. Another important invention was the circulation of blood. A great advance. Sir Francis Drake circumcised the world with a 100-foot clipper. He did it. The government of England was and is a limited mockery. King Henry V found walking difficult because I can type gibberish with my mouth. Henry VIII found walking difficult because he had an abbess on his knee. Queen Elizabeth was the Virgin Queen. As a queen, she was a success. When Elizabeth exposed herself before her troops, they all shouted, "Hurrah!" Then her navy went out and defeated the Spanish armadillo.